Get ready for it. Ka-kank. That was nice and loud. I said it with my chest. I said it with my chest. Hello, welcome back. If you see me, it's Steve and Mike. It must mean it's Wednesday, 8 p.m. EST. It also means Pencil's back, baby. You're soaking in it. Live on your stereo. Guys, welcome back to Pencil, your weekly live cast where three expert cartoonists pitch me, I must be dreaming, yes, real cartoonists, talk shop and talk to you about the world of creativity and making something out of nothing as a profession. We do that every day of our lives. I'm your first host. I'm JAMAR NICHOLAS. I am on the board of the National Cartoonist Society and also the Philadelphia chapter chair. Go Birds! I also have a lovely series at Scholastic called Leon the Extraordinary. Worst Friends Forever is my newest book. It is in stores now. Go get it. Why don't you? I would be remiss if I did not introduce my co-host, cohort, and co-conspirator. He is the Bill Bixby of webcomics, walking down that lonely internet superhighway with a melodic tinkle following him. He is known in these streets as Stone Cold Steve Conley. Tell him, Steve Conley, how you doing?
I am too young to get all of those references. I spent so much time Googling them last week just to try to figure out what you're talking about.
You have no idea what I'm talking about. I love it.
But I am the Coco host.
The street.
My name is Steve Conley. I write and draw the webcomic, your 83rd favorite webcomic, The Middle Age, which you can read at Webtoons, Go Comics, Tapas, and my own website at middleagecomic.com. And I also make D&D stuff, including the new one, Nimblemancy, which just came out.
Yes.
I just got these from the printer. I'm very happy with how they turned out. They're lovely. But that's D&D stuff. We don't care about that. That's not what we're talking about.
You got what's that behind you? They right next to the Nimblemancy. What are those?
These lanterns. I sculpted some lanterns. You know, you learn the 3D. You learn the 3D, and so you sculpt.
You're killing me, Steve Conley. You made those?
Yeah. little D20 symbols on them all over the place.
Oh, I gotta get one of those. That's amazing. Steve is way too humble about this.
We're nerds. What I did was I found the lanterns on the Amazon and measured them, and then created little lanterns and pedestals so I can go through when the power goes out the next hurricane, I can skulk.
I love it.
You just have a room of lanterns.
I will now. But I would be remiss if I didn't introduce the Tower of Power, the man hour, too sweet to be sour, the cartoonist who walks, Mr. Mike Manley.
Hello, everyone.
Who lumbers?
Mockery of a man. My name is Mike Manley, and I am a multi-generational veteran of comics who's probably drawn your childhood.
That's amazing, Mike Manley. And you know what? It's funny as the sand leaves the hourglass. It's really hard to believe that, I also remember when I was a youngster in the 7-Eleven going through the spinner rack, I pulled a Alpha Flight issue off of there that may have been inked by you. What a weird life that we live, that I could then become friends with you later down the road. All roads lead to Mike Manley, is I think what I'm saying. So
even if you don't want them to, you keep trying to go, but you do that thing where you're trying to walk towards the North Pole, but the Earth is rotating, so you keep rotating back to Mike Manley no matter what.
I love it, Mike. So when you talk about these instances where people say you drew my childhood, are the people kind of reacting to you with like a reverence, or is there a bit of system shock there? Like, because one of the things that I've been kind of seeing lately is that there's a little bit of a disconnect between the Thing, not the Marvel Thing, the Thing, and the person who made the Thing. You know what I mean? So when somebody kind of matches those two things up in front of you, how is their reaction? Is it like just kind of like, oh wow, you're the guy? Or, you know what I mean? How does that usually work?
I guess they probably just think it's funny that, when I post something, I posted something on Blue Sky. I'm a big fan of the Blue Sky. And a guy told me, I remember reading that on the floor inside of a Toys R Us.
Wow.
Right. So it's because I don't think of it in that way. I mean, I know what I've done or whatever, but I don't, I think about that, I suppose, in the way if I think about, when did I read that Jack Kirby comic? When did I read that Neil Adams comic? So it's sort of weird for me to have people in some ways tell me that, because I don't think of myself in that way, So yeah, but it's always it happens all the time now. It used to not happen, I mean, people liked your stuff or whatever, but now it's really routine for people to tell me every week. I remember that when I was a kid. My grandma bought me that, or this guy, he remembers reading an issue of Darkhawk in the Toys R Us, and I was thinking, like, I don't remember comics being in Toys R Us, but yes, because that kid read them. So
I think there was a minute where they were in the cellophane bag with like a chunk, like a price tag on the bag, or maybe they were bagging them up in like 3-packs.
I mean, I used to get those as a kid. Whitman used to repackage comics.
Right.
I remember like Kresge or Kmart, or Kresge's, which was like before they had Kmart, was Kresge Mart.
The
and they would have like a big giant, like refrigerator sized box, or maybe even bigger, and it would be in the middle of the store, and there would be like a bajillion of these packages of comics, which were cheaper because you get like 3 or 5 in the pack for the price of basically like what one comic was, I think.
Were they just loose in the box, like packaged?
No, well, they were packaged,
and so people were fishing through them to find the one they
so
wanted.
you would like, oh, what's this one? Richie Rich. Oh, I don't want that. What's this one? It's Superman. Okay, but then you would happen is you would buy the one that you could see, and you were trying to like bend the package to see what else.
Yeah,
so you might get like one Superman or one Batman, and then you might get like a little Lulu or something. You know, it was like you never knew what you were gonna get.
I love it. It almost reminds me of in the middle of the supermarket, that giant like steel cage with the rubber balls in it. And like the one that you wanted was always in the top middle, and like your dad had to climb in there, and like Bret Hart, and like.
Well, it was the same thing in the Midwest. There used to be vending machines that sold comic books. And so they would have like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 bins, and you could look in and you would see, oh, there's a Superman in that one. And you'd put your money in like a coin operated laundry, and the comic would come out. But didn't mean that the comic you saw on top would be the comic that came out of the bottom.
Wow. It's like,
so you would like, oh, no, you know,
like the luncheon machine, like the Horn and Hatter, right?
Yeah. So I remember this had to be 7 or 8. This is before I was 10 years old, and I remember there was the drugstore sold them on the rack. The grocery store sold them on a rack. The Kresge's sold them in that machine, and one of the supermarkets sold them in that big box of like Whitman samplers or whatever, you know. So that's how I bought all my comics until about 73, and then there was a little store down the street that sold them with the covers ripped off. And
then as you walked out of the store, there was a glint in the night sky, and JAMAR Nicholas was born in 1973.
And I'm like, oh, what is this, being basked in this strange radiation?
What it was like, I haven't felt this, something like this.
That's right. It's just I haven't felt this presence. I haven't felt this presence ever.
Oh my God, this is great. Well, guys, we always do a little witty banter to warm us up for the show.
Was that witty? Was that witty enough for you?
It was banter. I'll give you that.
Technically banter.
Technically banter. If this is your first time watching Pencil to Pencil, you are in for a treat. There's not a lot of places on Al Gore's internet where you get to actually talk with real cartoonists, not like somebody who's like kind of like cosplaying as a cartoonist, like real cartoonists. And tonight we have a very special guest. Wayno is here, and Wayno, another tried and true Pennsylvanian. It's a Pennsylvania night tonight.
Oh, time for Scrapple.
That's right. Put the Scrapple up. Who is joining us? Who is the daily cartoonist of the Bizarro daily strip? So, Bizarro comes from a long line of, would it be fair to say, absurdist single panel strips like Far Side and Dave Blazek's Loose Parts. Bizarro's been one of my favorite things for a really long time. I have some old collections, this is before Wayno's time, where I think it was on the cover, where this a criminal was like in somebody's bushes and looking at a cat in the window, and it says, "Warning, house covered in cat hair." I love that. That's my favorite one. So we had such a great time talking to Dave Blazek about the etymology of the single panel strip and kind of just like what you have to, what you have to be on to kind of create things like that over and over and over and over and over again. So I'm really excited to talk to Wayno. He's a good friend, and also as a Pennsylvanian, we have a lot to talk about. So Wayno, prepare for rendering. Let me get my stuff together, and we're about to start the show. You guys are in for a treat. Where's my stuff? All right, there it is. There he is. I'm really excited. Get ready for rendering. Wayno, welcome to Pencil to Pencil. Ping!
There we are.
You've been rendered.
Yeah, that was witty banter.
Thank you.
I remember those packages of comics.
Oh, right, cool.
In the sealed in the bag, and you just knew the one that was sandwiched in the center was a dog.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know,
They knew what they were doing, like Batman on one side, Spider-Man, and then a turd in the middle.
Right. Yeah.
I seem to remember for a while, a lot of them had like sad sacks or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, although those were all right.
Yeah, sad sacks. Mike, I gave you a bunch of sad sacks.
Yeah.
Those...
Some friend you are having my heart surgery, and you bring me a bag of sad sacks.
Oh! You were laughing.
That's right.
That's fantastic.
Please unplug me.
I think, yeah, so sorry about that, Mike. Oops. So, Wayno, what's been really fantastic about getting to know Wayno over the last couple of years, and a lot of this has been predicated by me joining the National Cartoonist Society. You have no idea what the National Cartoonist Society is. It is exactly what it sounds like it is. It is a society of cartoonists. Card-carrying member Steve Conley. And what's really even cool, and I don't know if Wayno wants to talk about it, Wayno was also a chapter chair of Pittsburgh. So I actually met up with Wayno last year because I was on tour for my last book. And my travels took me to Pittsburgh. And I said, Wayno, I've never been to Pittsburgh, PA. As a Philadelphian, we're supposed to have some sort of rivalry. Because it's all sports, right?
Right.
And I had the greatest time in Pittsburgh. I kind of stood on a stairway somewhere and went, I kind of like it here. Wayno, what was I thinking? And Wayno was the greatest guest. So representing Pittsburgh, maybe we could just start there. Wayno, is there, what kind of cartooning community and like creative community is out there in Pittsburgh? Is it very tight? Or are there a lot of like young people who are interested in the art form? How's the climate?
Yeah, it's very mixed, and we have young people and old people, and we have I think we have about right now 11 members in our chapter, but I have an email list of like people that are involved in cartooning in the area, and it's probably about 40 or 50 people. So yeah, it's a good community, and there's people in a lot of different areas. We have some people that are in the sort of Marvel world, Jim Rugg and Tom Scholey, editorial cartoonist Rob Rogers. So there's a real mix here, and just as from your local community and within the NCS, it's kind of cool because there aren't many of us in the world, and it's all very sort of friendly and supportive, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm. Now, talking about our advanced ages, are you still kind of like getting out into the community? Do you kind of have your lunch buddies, or do you kind of get introduced to new young cartoonists who are trying to get started?
I haven't for a while, and I need to kind of reinvigorate that. We rather than having strictly NCS chapter meetings, and this kind of started before me. There was a sort of just like a monthly lunch at a local hot dog place, and one of our members who's moved away, David Colson, used to organize that. I became the chapter chair and continued that, and then in the first quarter of 2020, everything kind of fell apart we got out of that habit. And then we had this great local restaurant that we'd go on a Tuesday, a slow day for them. And they were happy to have a group that we never knew if there would be 3 people or 15 people. But they'd all want a separate check, but they were very accommodating to us, and they ended up going, selling the business. So I'm kind of missing that group activity or that group dynamic, and trying to find or think of a place that we can meet up with an unknown number of people, and we'll probably linger. So that's kind of where we're at. And then I personally, my wife is very kind about reminding me that I need to get away from this room and get out into the world and just see people, and it's always good, particularly like for when we get into the discussion of like ideas and writing and stuff, to just get out of your place and get out of your head and do something else, see something else. And so I'm that's one of my resolutions for the year, is to
kind of get out of the chair a little bit.
Get out of the chair. Yeah. I mean, this chair at the computer, I'm over here like standing at my drawing table, and that's pretty much happens a little or a lot every day of the week.
I have one other thing to say about diners, because I can't keep on a specific topic. Teenagers and old folks both loiter at eating establishments. I think that's funny. Like, a bunch of old dudes will babysit a cup of coffee for way too long, and I'm sure it's like, look, you guys need to get going here. Same thing with a basket of French fries. But I kind of miss that too, and Mike could talk about that. How being able to just like meet up at the diner and just kind of like toss the ball around is just really just good for your head.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, well, let's start talking about some comics. So, Wayno, were you always on track to be a cartoonist? Did you take a detour at some point? The origin story part of our show.
Yeah. I did take a long detour. So I mean, my earliest memories growing up, I loved comics, cartoons, all type, animated cartoons, newspaper comics, comic books, and music. For some reason, those two things in my brain worked. And when I was a kid, my parents were in Pittsburgh. We had 2 daily newspapers. We had a morning paper and an evening paper. So I read a lot of newspaper comics, even the ones I didn't like. I'd just read them all. And collected paperback books and all that kind of thing. And I knew that's what I always wanted to do, but I didn't know how to go about it. And I also my parents had certain expectations and dominance. I went to the University of Pittsburgh as an English major, and I ended up getting a degree in engineering and then having jobs that I hated.
Wow.
But everything that we did until today somehow informs that. So it's kind of not productive to say, oh, I wish something different had happened then, because you wouldn't be the same person. But I kind of graduated to reading Mad when I was in my preteens, I guess, and buying all those old paperback collections. And I had like this switch flipped when I bought the paperbacks that had the reprints of the early Kurtzman Mads, just on a regular pocketbook and cheap pulp, and the reproduction was awful, but it was there. And particularly Will Elder's Archie parody, Starchy. There was one particular panel there, that just like flipped me out. because the drawings were so different from what I was used to, and it felt like something I wasn't supposed to see. Like,
Yeah.
I know my parents wouldn't want me to see this, and then I was always kind of chasing that the rest of my life with music and comics. I used to get money for lunch at the school cafeteria, and instead of getting like the whole, salad and everything, I would get like a chocolate milk and a package of Lance crackers, and then hoard the rest of my money, and on the weekends go to buy comics and records. So I spent a lot of, there were no comic shops. We'd buy comics at the drugstore,
Mm-hmm.
in those packages at a corner store. But when I was like junior high, early high school, record stores started to get a spinner rack with these underground comics in it. And, like that just was another one of those things, like, I got to have more of this, and they don't want me to see it, but I must. And
what were some of the titles that you were checking out? And
Zap and the Freak Brothers.
Right.
I liked all of the. I liked a lot of them. Like Gilbert Shelton's The Wonder Warthog was just like this crazy superhero parody, and since I kind of like came up through reading the superhero comics, seeing them destroyed in that way was really influential on me. And I had the same kind of thing when I saw like the early issues of National Lampoon at the drugstores. But I got like a job and I had some jobs in offices with like engineering nerds, and was very unhappy, and wanted to do some form of artistic expression, but I didn't know how to go about it or what to do. But I was very good friends with a guy who owned like the first record store that had Sex Pistols records, and so we came up with this scheme to publish a magazine, a zine, to review records, and we would send them to all the independent labels to get the free records. So I did like some designs and layout and drawings there, and started to learn a little bit about doing things for print. And then there was this kind of a turn in the mid 80s when I learned through an article in the Comics Journal about people that were publishing their own mini comics. And we had like an internet that was the postal system. And you would get, there was no editors, it was totally free, And so this was my first self-published comic.
Well, hold on, let me give you the screen.
Yeah,
there we go. Baby Godzilla. It was like this. It was like a kind of before they did this thing, like behind the music, his rise and fall, and I connected with people all over the country, just exchanging these books, or putting $1 in an envelope and sending them to each other. And some of them were narrative, and some of them were just like goofy experiments. I did this one called Altercations, where I just took like, it'll be hard to see, but I took like photos out of newspapers and magazines and just like messed with them.
Yeah.
Was that part of Kappa Alpha, or whatever it was? Were
no,
you
I
part of
don't.
that?
I'm not familiar with that. No.
Because there were a friend of mine who I met through the local comic book store did that, and he produced a fanzine that was somehow then bundled with other people that were doing what you're doing, like fanzines, and they would like send them around.
Oh yeah, I do kind of remember that. And then there was like a couple of publications that started reviewing these things and publishing everybody's addresses. There was one called Fact Sheet 5.
Yeah.
I remember that,
Yeah, you just go through there and get in contact with all these people. So around the late 80s, early 90s, there was sort of an explosion of post-underground alternative comics, like the early days of Fantagraphics. And one of the editors at Fantagraphics contacted me and said, why don't you try doing something like normal page size? And I started getting into these anthologies. And I kind of like fell into this because of all this kind of network, when the Ninja Turtle guys like suddenly became millionaires. One of them, Kevin Eastman, started a publishing company called Tundra. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all.
Sure.
And they did like dozens and dozens and dozens of books. And I got, I can show you some things on if I can share my screen here, I'll come up with this.
All right. Steve, you got it?
I got it.
Yeah, so I did this really kind of juvenile comic for 3 issues called Beer Nuts until, and I wasn't personally responsible for this, but Tundra did go out of business. But, and I was trying to work with other sort of indie publishers, and it was fun. It was a good learning experience, but it was a lot of work. It took a long time to complete something to see it published, and not a lot of money. But I started getting calls from art directors to do illustration. And my first illustration client was The Guardian in London. And again, just a little bit before the internet. So I would get an assignment. They would call me here in Pittsburgh, here in the States, at like 4 a.m. and ask me to draw something. I would fax them a sketch, and they'd call me back and say, yeah, go ahead and do this. And if it was color work, I would do a little acrylic painting, and then FedEx it to some courier in New York who flew to London. It was crazy. It was like what a computer does, but little people were doing all of the steps.
Right.
And then I got some illustration work that was more comics oriented when Nickelodeon started their kids magazine, and I was in there just about every issue for their entire run from 1993 to 2009.
Wow.
Doing some comics, a lot of illustrations. I did a lot. I kind of found this niche where they had like activities where you would make a little booklet, and I would draw all these hands assembling for the instructions. So that was my sort of like syndicated comics thing. And then I did a lot of work. I connected back with music. I was doing work for this Wayno Records.
Love Wayno. Yeah.
And I did, over the course of a few years in the early 2000s, I did like 150 of these really just pure black and white line art portraits of recording artists. So I did a lot of different stuff. But I always knew I wanted to do cartooning, and specifically syndicated cartooning, which I had the chance to do once I, by chance, met Dan Piraro.
Wow.
How are you? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
How are you? So how are these clients finding you at this point in this sort of pre-internet era? Was it from the Tundra work? Was it from
Well, that was originally how they found me, and then I kind of like learned about being a freelance illustrator. So, multiple times a year, I would send out 500 postcards to art directors all over. I would, visit New York 3 or 4 times a year and carry a portfolio around to publications. I never got in the Village Voice, but I was in the New York Press every week for multiple years. That was sort of like the snotty young brother of and Entertainment Weekly. I did a lot of work with them, so I learned a little bit about how to do characters. But it was just, once I found out how, getting an assignment, turning it around, and then getting paid within a few weeks worked. I liked that, so I just kind of kept working that business.
That's great.
Wayno,
sorry.
I'm sorry. Everybody's got questions. Wayno, I have a question about, especially during that era, because I know, like, New York was kind of a hot spot for that kind of, like, those illustration gigs. Did you feel at all kind of pigeonholed by being in Pittsburgh, or would you travel, or you figured out just how to get things going through the mail, like with your postcards and things like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, it would definitely help to like show your face at offices, and it was fun too. I get to go to New York and do all the New York stuff, and go to the Nickelodeon was in the Viacom building, in that giant Warner Brothers building at Times Square, and I felt like a real grown-up professional.
I was going to ask, going back a little before that, when you were a teenager, were you drawing? Did you have a sketchbook? Were you, did you draw in high school? Did you how did you learn how to use the tools and things?
Right. Yeah. I was drawing all the time. I had paper and pencils and pens, and, I was drawing when I was supposed to be paying attention in class, and my earliest memories are of drawing, like copying comics out of the newspaper or trying to draw the cartoons I watched on Saturday. I recently on Facebook got this message from the music teacher from when I was in junior high, and he said, "I remember you, and you did this great drawing of all the teachers and the art. I wanted it, and the art teacher wouldn't give it to me, and I had no memory of it, but it was definitely something I would have done, And in fact, when I was in high school, a handful of friends and I made unauthorized use of ditto machines, and we did, again, very juvenile, sort of like what our idea of an underground newspaper was, and almost got kicked out of graduating. It was just something that could not be denied. It was just I couldn't not do that.
And you were saying, so you're getting to school, you find yourself in engineering, you find yourself in a job you're not a fan of, but you're reading the Comics Journal. I love that. How that's kind of lifeblood of like the Comics Journal, Comic Buyer's Guide, whatever we could find about.
Right. Comic Buyer's Guide, Comics Journal, and our offices were the office that I reported to was in downtown Pittsburgh, and by that time later on there was a comic shop, so at lunchtime I could go there, and if I did the illustration work on weekends and like overnight while I was having a full-time job. So there was a place where I could go to. There was also a place downtown where on my lunch hour I could run out of the office and go to have photostats made, so that I could send high quality reproductions to my illustration clients. So I basically was working 2 full-time jobs for a lot of years.
So, but there must have been that point where you're like, I'm gonna take my hands off the handlebar and I'm gonna go full time with the illustration, right? Because there's that point where you were saying you're straddling, but there must have been that year or that that 6 months where you go like, I'm getting enough work now to
Yeah, I kind of
like my slide ruler,
yeah, right. Yeah. Actually, I kind of weaned myself because I went to like a part-time technical job, and then it was with a university, and it wasn't. I didn't have to like really do any technical stuff. I was like the person like asking people to donate money so that the super smart graduate students could do research, and then that funding went away. So like I had to do what I really should have been doing or wanted to do all along.
It's funny that we just had Donato was it last week?
Yeah.
And this thing came up because he went to school for engineering
The week before,
and then a bunch of people in the chat were like, I went to school for engineering and I'm a cartoonist. It seems like a very interesting ley line right there.
Yeah, I don't understand it, but it's not uncommon at all. But there's also a big overlap with like cartoonists and musicians, who either play as a hobbyist or professionally, or so. I don't know. The brain is an interesting place.
Yeah, my brother Dave, who's a musician, he used to draw like me, and he has a very good sense of humor. So I think he could have always been a good cartoonist, but I think he just, what I think it is, and maybe I'm wrong, is music is very immediate, and cartooning is baking. It's like you have to go through the process to get the finished thing. And for some people, that immediacy of just, you pick up the guitar and you're like doing it. It's like happening immediately.
Yeah. The thing about drawing, though, is that kids draw,
Yeah.
And it's a pre sort of verbal way of written communication. And, some of us fortunately didn't outgrow that or didn't become, self-conscious that I'm not that good at it and can't draw and comparing yourselves to other people and all that kind of stuff.
Was there ever that period in your work where you're like looking over your shoulder and having self-doubt or anything like that?
Yeah, last week. That's part of the deal, or at least the I don't trust anybody who has complete, supreme, uninterrupted confidence.
But not the crippling kind. The kind of like, I'm not going to share this. There's so many young cartoonists who just like they don't want to show their work for fear of being judged.
Yeah, no, I don't think I ever really had that. I didn't care. I just wanted somebody to see it. And a lot of it was judged and a lot of it was disapproved of. But I don't know, for some reason that instead of discouraging me, that made me say, oh yeah.
Well, also it's different because back in that era, like I said, it was like baking. You got your idea, you made your comic, all the handmade process of making the thing and going to the printer and sending it out and mailing it and all that stuff. And now you draw your comic and it's immediately on Instagram. Everybody in the world can render a heart or not.
Right. Or crop your name out and put their own caption.
Exactly. Or turn you into a meme or something,
Right.
So I do think that sort of delayed satisfaction is not something that happens in the same way anymore, because when we were teenagers, there was definitely a delay between the time you would make something, go to the printer, get it printed, send it to somebody or send it to somebody to be printed. It might be weeks or a month or whatever. And you were on to creating other things before, yeah, I got it. Looks okay. But you didn't get that immediate public response that's either affirming or crushing, you know?
Yeah. And I think, Mike, that what you're describing, that delay or that time that it takes, kind of gave the work some inherent value to you. It's like a photograph. You know, you'd have to put your film in the camera and take it to get developed, and you'd have a limited number of them. Now you have unlimited pictures. There's no their value is less as an individual item.
Right. So do you find now that you're doing a syndicated cartoon, if people like your stuff, it's like, well, I want more. On one hand, you know, give me 50 more of them, right? Or do you feel yourself that are they less precious today than they would have been 20 years ago?
You mean the daily cartoons that I'm
doing?
doing?
The daily cartoons, are they still as precious, or is it just that's the way the world looks at all images now because there's so much every day?
Yeah, I think it's kind of half and half. It depends on the awareness of, I mean, like all of us, they mean something to us and they have value. And I think that, and this isn't like describing people as being mean or inconsiderate. It's just sort of an awareness that they don't always realize or consider that there's a person who spent time making this.
Right.
You know, when people watch late night television, they, at some level, kind of think like Stephen Colbert's like sitting backstage and, you know, having a Mountain Dew or something, and he just comes out and starts talking about what's on his mind. That's, you know, unless you do that, or unless you do something like that, you may not consciously realize that it's work. There's a lot of work and preparation and refinement behind it. So, you know, that's always going to be there, but that doesn't bother me as much as when I first started and I would read all the comments everywhere.
Don't read the comments, Wayno.
Yeah,
Don't
never
read
read
the
the comments. Yeah. That I learned that very early on when I started with King Features. The writer of Judge Parker told me, and whatever you do, don't go read the comments.
Right. Well, it seems like it's worse for like a Judge Parker, the kind of like serialized stories that people really pile on to those in the comments. But you know, on the other hand, I get some really sweet emails from people. You know, when someone takes the time to send, it's funny now I think of it like when you're saying take the time to send an email, that's like an extra effort, but it is, you know, and even if somebody has a complaint or a correction, unless they're really extreme, I try to like listen and answer them in a sincere way, and it's usually pretty good. You know, it usually comes out all right. When you respond, I think that that just people don't expect that all the time.
Right.
When you go, oh, okay, well, that seems like a reasonable person.
or they don't think it's, or they don't think it's really you.
Right. You're a real person. In fact, I had a little discussion with that on another podcast last week, the Phantom podcast. And my theory was that at least with the the serial strips is that the people who write in general are the people that are complaining, and the people who like it don't write. The people who like your work, at least in the case of something like the Phantom, are generally, if they're writing, they're complaining about that this is not the version that they read when they're 12.
Right.
What the person who and I get nice letters too, but it just seems to be, so maybe there's a difference also between humor and drama. Maybe the reader has a different reaction to that.
Could be, yeah.
Do people send you jokes like, here's an idea for you?
Yes. And yeah, that just happens. But
I'm curious about the corrections you mentioned. what would be a correction? That
I had a great one where I did a gag with a like a weather, like a meteorologist that was like a hippie, and the dialogue was tomorrow's highs will be in the early 70s. So I had a map with like 70, 72, 73 all over it, and a guy sent me this really angry email that, when you don't write 1973, when you just write 73 and you have an apostrophe there. And I think I had, I don't know, a backwards apostrophe or an upside down apostrophe or something. It was just some little mark that I had drawn. And, he said, it's in, not only, so I had, the temperatures scattered around the map. He said, it's bad enough that you do it, but you repeated it. The writer or the artist repeated it 8 times. It's inexcusable. But
wait till he sees my Oxford comma.
Right. But I laughed about it, and I wrote back to him, and I said thanks for letting me know about that. And it's interesting on word processing, and when you type something like that, it doesn't use the apostrophe.
Yeah.
It uses an open quotation, single quotation mark. Mm-hmm. So even you have to override that to make it work. And then I said, but I said I'm going to correct the art, so the one that's online will be correct going forward. And he said, "Oh, thanks for answering me." That was, it was it's easy to just like go off, and then you can't take it back because it's been emailed to somebody. So I try not to take anything like that too personally.
Well, Wayno, let's spend some time talking about, because I have some questions about humor, but I want to kind of cross the threshold of how you and Dan started working together on the strip. So can you talk about that?
Sure. So Dan was here in Pittsburgh in 2009 for an event at a now defunct cartoon museum that was in town, and I was involved with. A little bit before he came to town, he had taken a week's vacation, and he had a guest cartoonist to fill in for him on Bizarro. And that kind of like set something off in my head. And I'm not really an aggressive person, but at this event where I met him, I said, "Hey, I'm Wayno. I'm a cartoonist too. And next time you go on vacation, you should hire me to do this." And we didn't know each other, and he was wondering who this guy was, but he's very gracious. And he said, "Well, sometimes I use gags from writers, so why don't you send me some sketches, email me some sketches?" And so I sent him some roughs, and we found pretty quickly that we had very similar kind of sensibilities for the single panel cartoon, and he started buying gags from me. And over the course of a few years, I did, I don't know, 150 or so of those. And I learned how to, he asked me if I wanted to assist him coloring the panels. So I visited him. This is when he lived in Brooklyn, and spent a few days with him and studied the insanely detailed way that he colors his comics. He colors like an oil painter, or he did. So he would do like a layer of light and shadows, and then like a layer of color on top of that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I did that for about 3 years, and I did, fill in as guest cartoonist a couple times. And when his contract was up for renewal in 2013, he asked me if I wanted to take over doing the dailies. And I said, yeah, if you think I can do it, I would love to do that. But we couldn't make that happen with King. But then 5 years later, Dan's was thinking about retiring or semi-retiring, and his editor said, well, why don't you just do the Sundays and have, that guy that you work with do the daily. So it was, after they marinated on the idea for 5 years, then they liked it. So that's what happened. In the meantime, I was doing an online comic on Go Comics 3 days a week. So I kind of thought that there might be a possibility this could happen with Dan. So I was trying to get my chops up and learn how to do 3 per week. And then all of a sudden, one day I had to start doing 6 per week, and that was a big change. But we work really well together. We, I do when I write a batch, I send him roughs, and we'll discuss them and which ones we think are the best, and then I just go and draw them and color them and get them all ready and send them off. So everything that I was doing my whole life, I think, was kind of training for this. And then I like to tell people that I joined a dying industry at the age when people are starting to think of retirement.
Yeah. Well, that's funny that you mentioned that one thing about them like not being so sure, and I think it was probably more that they, with the newspaper strips, they were very hesitant to change a creator's name or a creator on the strip, because I was told that gave the newspaper a chance to say, well, we don't want that strip anymore now that so and so is not on the strip, and this other person's on the strip.
Right. I think that Dan himself Bizarro has no continuing character, so Dan was the brand,
Right.
But one great thing is when I was writing for him, when I was writing gag, because lots of people use gag writers, but he always gave me a byline on the comic. So immediately from when I started working with him, it would say, Dan Piraro with Wayno. So I was kind of becoming integrated into it early on. So, and Dan continues to do the Sunday pages, which I would never take on. 6 is plenty. I'm just getting used to doing that after 7 years of it. So,
Wayno, can we go back to looking at can we see some strips?
Yeah, sure. So let me, I'll share the, you want to share my screen again?
Mm-hmm.
So I can kind of go through things. I can show you a little process stuff too. So this is the day we met. Had a sword fight there. And it was a draw. No one was hurt. And I started sending Dan gags. And early on, I was really big on clowns. And I like this. This was one of I think this was the second one that what ran, and it was kind of like a cliched line that you hear a million times on cop shows. Found this, and it's been fired recently, but it's a clown, so it's going bang. And then I did guest cartoonist, and I got to get like music in the thing. So I got Miles Davis in a nationally syndicated cartoon where he's in hell surrounded by accordion players. And then one that I'm not sure we would do today, but this was my favorite guest week one, which was another clown one where I have clown, the man on the ledge thing. I was trying to talk him down. So it's one of those things where something's not happening there. It's going to happen. And you figure it out,
Just the hair blowing is amazing.
There's a little drama there. Oh, and I also did a guest week with for Hillary Price once too.
Oh,
She
wow.
was very generous to have me do that. So I got another music thing, the Dead of Winter. So now currently, the way things go is I start writing in the sketchbook. Usually just words, but I'll start with just really crappy pencils. Like these aren't sketchbooks that would ever be exhibited in a museum. But so the one I'm going to show you is these two prospectors panning for gold. And so I'll take one of these scribbles and import it into Photoshop, put it into a blank panel, and then do like a quick digital sketch over top of it. And so that was my digital sketch of that Dan and I talked over. And I see I made some changes in it. I took out the name Buster. I didn't think I needed that. I was trying to pare away unnecessary words.
Yeah.
So then I print this out and I put it on my light table, and then I pencil and ink on top of that. So this is what my original art looks like. It doesn't really look like the finished strip. I have all my pencil lines showing there, and I knew this one was going to need more landscape because I do Bizarro every day as a vertical panel portrait, but some newspapers run it in a strip space. So I have to move things around.
Wow.
So I really do every daily twice.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So this is what the color one looked like. And you can see back here, my drawing's pretty good, but like I said, this guy's head is too big. So when I Photoshop it, we make his head a little smaller, and I get it all put together. And then I do I turn it into a strip. So this one worked without too much reconfiguration, but sometimes I should have scanned one of these. Sometimes my originals are like what I call an exploded view. So I'll have all the characters and all the background elements separate and then layer them for the panel. And then when it's time to do the strip, I can move them around easily.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of crazy and insane. But I'm, I never complain about having the job I've wanted my entire life. So it's just, and a lot of other cartoonists do that. I think Dave Blazik does. And I know that some of the other single panel cartoonists have to do that. And I don't really know how many papers use that strip format. And I kind of don't want to know, because if it's 10, then I'd feel awful, because it's like an extra half day of it's like a half a day of work to do those conversions.
In your mind, which one is the real one?
The real one is the panel. But sometimes the strip ones I really like how they turn out. Occasionally I will prefer them. And sometimes I do ones that are too vertical, so I'll have to do them sideways in the strip.
Okay.
But the thing that I always, I learned a lot of things. Like there's no headroom for the balloons, so the balloons have to be beside the characters rather than on top of them. And if I have 3 characters and the one in the middle is speaking, when I do the strip, I'm screwed because the tail has to get to that person somehow. So
and thus the engineering degree.
Right. But I have done a couple of times where I'll, like, if there was a guy in the middle here who was talking, I'll just like put the balloon over here on the right and like have the tail go behind the other person, and it reads. So you learn to do what you have to do.
Wayno, would you mind going back to your kind of landscape sketch where we showed the background?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So like you're drawing through so much of this environment for things that people may not ever see. Do you put that kind of detail into all of your strips, just knowing that you got to do it twice, just in case?
No.
Okay.
No, I do a lot of. Let me see if I have any here. I do a lot where I have like 2 people sitting at a table talking to each other, and I know that I can like reconfigure that pretty easily to convert. I try not to have to draw stuff that no one's going to see. Like this one though I kind of got into it while I was doing it. I was kind of in, like this will probably, and I was kind of playing a game with myself. Like this will probably work pretty well without a lot of alteration to the art. So, it's like doing a puzzle.
Right. So I would always, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about all the kind of bizarro characters that always get included in the strips, like the slice of pie and the alien and all of that.
Yeah, Dan started that kind of by accident, I think, just to amuse himself. I think he said that he drew, I don't know, there was some scene in an office or something, and he put a bird upside down under a chair, and people noticed it, and it just evolved over time. And I think when I came on, he had like a dozen of these. We call them secret symbols, and we have like this like arcane description of each of them, and a lot of people really follow that. So it's it's some kind of a hook. It's not a beloved character that can be turned into million selling plush toys, but
right.
It's just like an extra little thing that some people look for. Some people that's all they do is read it each day and count the symbols. And there's some people that comment online that on the King Features site that will pick out whatever 3 or 4 or 5 symbols that are in the panel and like write a little story about it, which is really kind of fun to see. I do like to see those comments.
That's wild. There's a couple of questions in the chat. One of the things, and I still want to get to the humor piece, is our good buddy Paul Pate, who's a fantastic cartoonist in his own right, says,
yeah.
What I love is that Wayno you present as so mainstream, Wayno, in person, but the cartoons are good and twisted.
Yeah, that's how you get them. That's how you sneak in. You can't come in with, you can't like get into the you can't get into the, I'm trying to think of a place, a conservative place with a mohawk, but you can subvert from within. But yeah, I'm just like a person. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah. So kind of with that, and there was another question kind of buried in here about kind of, here it is. James from YouTube says, this has been sitting in the queue for a while. You mentioned National Lampoon. Who were some of your favorite cartoonists from that era? And have you had the opportunity to meet any of them? Cheney, Groves, Rodriguez, M.K. Brown?
I have not met. I'm trying to think if I've ever met any of the Lampoon cartoonists. No, but I loved Ed Zabitsky's stuff in there, which was like really primitive drawings and lots, really wordy. And M.K. Brown and Rodriguez. His stuff was great. Sam Gross. Oh, I've Arnie Roth,
Oh, wow.
who I have had the great honor of meeting and becoming friends with through the National Cartoonist Society. And he's another cartoonist who was a musician, and in the 50s and 60s he did a lot of album covers for Columbia Records and some other labels. So who else was in there? The comics, what did they call it? Comical Funnies or something. The comic section in there was great, and they used a lot of cartoonists as illustrators. They used Neil Adams and everybody.
That's when that was probably my era of reading it. I used to also love Rodriguez, and I heard that he used to draw his stuff on like a napkin or some kind of blotty paper to get that weird sort of blobby line of his. So I seem to remember reading that. I don't know if that's true or not, but he passed away.
Oh, and they had Gay and Wilson, who was one of my all-time heroes. Yeah.
I love that this piece works in black and white, that it's not just reliant on the color. That's really great.
Oh, that's funny that you say that, because when I was building the panel, I like temporarily hid the text just to see how it looked as a composition, and I really liked that too. And I put that in my Substack newsletter for readers to say, like, here's something that's going to appear in a couple of months, but I just like how it looks as. But that's unusual. Most of them just look like they look like the instructions when you used to build, like if you were building the model of Frankenstein, and like all the pieces are all spread out.
That's great. Well, you said you worked on it. You were sharing it early. It ties into a question from Tim Fielder on Facebook. How far in advance do you work?
Well, I think our minimum deadline is 6 weeks. 6 weeks out from publication, and I am currently, I think, 9 weeks. So I just finished up the week of April 14th.
So they love you. You're 9 weeks. They love you if you're at 9 weeks.
Yeah, I'd be more comfortable if I was about 15 weeks ahead, but I don't know if that will ever happen.
The buffer, yeah. The buffer never sleeps.
Yeah,
Right.
I was thinking too that when you were talking about music, I think especially with what we used to call quote unquote alternative or underground cartoonists, music was really big. Like Crumb was into music. I mean, that just seemed to be part of the. So many people who did that also.
Oh yeah,
into music or bluegrass or punk, you know, like, again, also like not mainstream, but slightly alternative music. And I sort of wonder, what that connection was. And if you go back to the old guys, the classic people, like, the classic newspaper guys, I have a feeling that they were not that type of person. They were listening to, Benny Goodman or Frank Sinatra or, much more mainstream. But the people who came in and did the punk cartooning, right? Like punk music or folk music, there does seem to be a very sort of consistent connection there.
Yeah, I said often that I think of single panel cartoons as like the punk rock 45s of comics, because it's not an epic. It's just like a single. It's like a 2-minute thing. You come in, you hit what you're hitting, and you're done. Maybe that's aspirational on my part.
Well, there's that. The common thread when I think about it, to me, is that all of us loved Mad Magazine, and Mad Magazine was also subversive, even though it was done by kind of mainstream. I mean, Kurtzman's not a subversive person, you know, but in the 50s, that was subversive. And I think the hard thing now is the world is so absurd. I was talking to my friend Bill Ray the other day. We were talking about Mad. It's like, it's hard to do that now because the world is so weird. It's hard to top what you could do in the 50s. You know, it was easy to do stuff that was subversive. Now it's much harder. So if you're in humor is different because of that. So
humor is different, yeah.
So do you find that humor is different today? And because of that, you know, one of the things about the newspapers is the newspapers are kind of plain Jane. They don't like to do anything that's like that's rattling the bird cage too much. So are you aware of the fact that like, this is pretty good, but King might not go for this?
To some extent, but I've not really ever had any, like I've never had any, the editors at King tell me or tell us not to run something. There was one time where the editor mentioned a possible sort of interpretation or concern that I hadn't considered, and it made sense to me, and but generally I depend on the editors for grammar and punctuation, except for on the weather map that we missed. But and then maybe I'm just like kind of not doing. I mean, the kind of work that I did in my solo comic books would not have been in the daily newspapers, but I don't think that was as good as. I think that was lesser quality humor than what I'm doing now.
Well, that touches on a question we got from YouTube. Dave in Austin. Creating the Daily Bizarro strip for years is a daunting task. If you could step off the strip treadmill for a month and do a one-shot project, what would that look like?
8 hours of sleep every night.
A dream journal?
Yeah, dream journal. For a few years I was doing paintings. I don't think I'd go back to that because I don't have a workspace where I could do it. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know what that would be. I think I might just read a whole lot and travel.
I have a question, Wayno.
Sure.
How much of your style had to kind of like morph into Dan's style to kind of make Bizarro yours and his at the same time?
Well, that was something that we talked about when we were negotiating with each other on that. And the simple fact is I can't draw like Dan. I can't draw as well as him. But our styles were already similar, and since I had already been coloring the strip, I used a very similar color palette, which is not typical newspapers. So I stuck with that, and we have some custom fonts that we use for the dialogue and the captions, and he really. I mean, if you look at like this one by itself, almost looks like it's pretty close to Dan's style, but other times it's definitely not. So no, he didn't put any kind of demands on me in that way, and that's once we agreed on that, that's what we presented to King Features when we proposed this. This is how we want to go forward with it, and they were very good about it, you know.
Yeah, well, my question to that was more of a, like, was there a period when you guys were kind of talking about this new kind of part of your working relationship where you started going back to the old stuff, trying to find like a vibe to kind of jump into with your own strips, or you just kind of just started day one and just made it happen?
I think because of all of the work that we had done together for 9 years before I took over the dailies, we kind of, as I said, we were both really synced as far as our writing styles and sensibilities, that it was a very natural kind of easy transition. But I mean, I can see differences in everything, but I don't know that every reader can, you know.
Right. Did you start doing stuff like using the same pen, the same tool, to get the same kind of line?
No, for the first few years, I did what I had always done, which was I would ink with a sable brush, and then for finer lines, I would use like pigment liners, or good quality markers like that. And then a few years ago, the quality of the sable brushes just started getting so inconsistent, and I found that a lot of the brush pens and markers that are sold as manga tools are really nice. So now I use, well, until I run out, I use this.
Oh yeah.
But these aren't produced anymore.
Yeah. Did you buy them all?
I bought as many as I could find, but I found another one that they make now that I think it's the same ink and the same point, but it's just in a different barrel, and it's made to look more like a traditional brush. So once the last 50 or so of these blue ones get used up, also I'm getting a lot better at making them last longer. Like I used to go through one of them every week.
Oh wow!
I think I was like, when I was making heavy lines, I was really pressing down hard.
Yeah.
But as my supply dwindles, I'm stretching them more.
Yeah.
keeping them alive.
So what, does the point go, or does it run out of ink?
No, the point gets mashed.
Right. Yeah.
Or because it's really nice. I like the point. It's not quite as flexible as a brush, but you can have some really nice line variation. Like the one that we were showing of the guys panning for gold. I think that was all just using that Kuretake pen. You just have to be really careful and learn to control it, like anything else, like with a brush.
Right.
Wayno, I want to check in with you one time. How are you doing? Do you want to start rapping, or do you want to go a little bit longer?
Let's see. I think I could go like maybe 15, till 9:45.
All right, sounds good. All right, then Tim Fielder, another amazing illustrator who we've had on the show. Tim asks, might be missing something. Have you considered using digital to draw? Tim is our resident techno guy. So
yeah, well, I do kind of a hybrid, but I always start with the. I like to draw on paper. I like the feel of the drawing on paper, and I like to have all of my. I like to have my stack of originals. It's a motivational technique.
Do you sell your originals at all, Wayno?
I've sold a couple, but it's pretty rare because I have to explain to people that it doesn't look like the finished cartoon. But I have sold a few. I have sold a few to collectors who understand that. And like I did a Sherlock Holmes gag once, and somebody who is a collector of Sherlock Holmes stuff contacted me, and it turned out that like he knows comic art. He has, like Jack Davis originals and stuff. So, okay, so you understand,
right?
It is, but no, I rarely do because I don't think people will like them. They want the cartoon that they see. So we sell prints, and also I plan if they'll take it to at some point donate all of the originals to a cartoon library and museum.
Okay. So after that customer or that art collector contacted you, did you have a lot of ideas for adding Sherlock Holmes into the upcoming episodes?
Gotta get some more Sherlock Holmes gags in here.
I was going to say that you were talking about that marker. There's I'm trying to remember his name now. Is a Disney, a Spanish Disney guy, and he's on Instagram.
Oh, right, Paco something.
Yeah, and he is inking all that stuff with a marker, and so you might be able to because a lot of people have switched over to markers because the quality of the Kolinsky sable brushes has declined. So it seems like a lot of people have gone over to markers because the markers are now permanent.
Right.
Like a lot of guys use markers in the old days, but then, 5 years later they turn purple, or they would, there's like a whole bunch of Gil Kane stuff that's just like disappearing. It's like very light pink now when because he liked to ink with those flare markers.
Yeah. Now these days the ink is good quality. So
Now the other thing you can do, and I don't know whether if the point lasts, you can pull the back of the pen off, take the wadding out, I use the rapidograph ink.
Oh, okay.
Fill it, put some drops in there, fill that put it back in there, and you refill your pen. So you can kind of, depending upon the pen, and if the point lasts, I know the one you're talking about, the point is softer, but you have the one that had the point's nylon and it's a little harder.
Yeah.
I used to do that with the Pitt pens, and I could get, you could get a lot more mileage out of them that way.
Yeah.
That's great.
So I think this would be a good point in our show where we attack the lightning round. What do you think, Steve?
Sounds good.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so let me get Wayno up to speed for this. All right, so Wayno, what we're going to do is the lightning round. Ka-chow! So Steve is going to read off a bunch of questions, and you should try to answer them as quickly as you can.
And feel free to punctuate them with any art that you might have in that slideshow. We want to make sure that there's a few pieces you want to share. Please do.
Okay.
Paul Pate on the YouTube asks, when you're out of the chair to inspire you, where out of the chair inspires you? When you do leave your
just taking a walk, seeing live music, hanging out in a coffee shop, reading. I do a lot of reading of mostly nonfiction. I like to read biographies of musicians, anything that's not cartoons.
That's great. When talking about the different formats of your comic, James on YouTube asks, doing both formats, just curious, was Wiley Miller one of the first to do this? Do you know?
He may have been. He's one of the best because his original art he kind of does everything with like a crane shot view, and his original art is like on a big like a Red Cross kind of layout.
Wow.
So he puts everything that's important right in the center, and then he'll put the dialogue on top, but he'll also draw the dialogue on this whichever side it belongs on. So he doesn't have to do a ton of manipulation. He really figured out an amazing method for doing that. And then occasionally he'll do like 4-panel gags, which the dimensions work in both formats. But I don't know if he was the first, but he really has it down.
That's great. And James, follow up with another question. When coloring for the syndicates, are there limits to the digital process? James has been fumbling around in the dark with their own efforts on this.
I don't know. I mean, I think that one thing you have to, the only thing that I really see as a limitation is like, I do a color layer with the colors that I think they should be. And then I know that when they're going to be printed on newspaper, it's going to suck up the ink and everything's going to get darker. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of make them slightly transparent. So my color layer, instead of being at 100%, when I send it in for printing, I reduce it to like 80% opacity.
Smart.
But no, I don't know if there's any real limits with it. You just have to make sure that things don't get too dark when they're printed.
Right. I remember when I started, King gave me a file that said, you know, the coloring was this way, and you couldn't have more than 200% saturation.
Okay.
Of any color. Now, of course, this was 15 years ago. This was for newsprint, and what they told me was that they had to set their default for the worst old, junky, beat-up press that their customers printed their newspapers on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So yeah, they definitely had a little handout, but of course, I immediately didn't do what they asked. And it turned out okay, because my dad used to clip the Judge Parker and send it to me from the free press, so I could actually see, okay, here's my computer screen. Here's what
I need to adjust. Yeah.
And it was printed away. I mean, they were like that big. They were even the Sundays was pretty small. So
yeah, that's the bigger concern, is that the print ones are getting smaller and smaller, and a lot of detail gets lost.
Well, thanks for those questions, James. We got two more. George Gant, Facebook. When it comes to editors, do you reach out to them directly to make sure you haven't made any grammatical mistakes, or do they catch them and reach out to you?
Well, up until a couple months ago, they would reach out to me when they caught them. But I decided a couple months ago that when I do the black and white, when I complete my black and white art, I send that to them, and then they get a really early advanced look while I'm doing the coloring. So I can usually make any changes while I'm in that process rather than afterwards. So I just decided, and I asked the person I work with most of the time if that would be okay if I sent them ahead of the uploads for her to review, and that works out well.
That's the magic of a buffer, right? As you're sending stuff in so far ahead that they can go through it, right? And also shout out to George. Beware of toddler.
Beware of toddler.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's
okay. I thought I recognized that name. I'm sorry, George.
our chat is filthy with cartoonists. I love it.
And another superstar, D. Parson.
Hey.
On Facebook, hello, fellow King cartoonist. General question: how long does it take for you to write a gag? how many do you write a week? How long does it take you to draw a strip? And since you only do a single panel, does it take less time than a 3 or 4 panel daily might?
No, it takes me a week. It takes me about a week to do a week. So I don't know. I can't break down like the writing and the drawing and the, to individual pieces, but like the drawing that we showed before, that was probably about 30 minutes of drawing, and then it has to be scanned and cleaned up. So it's kind of hard to break it all down, but I do at least 6 per week. Because that's how many I have to do to not fall off my buffer. Yeah.
So do you write them all, lay them all out, draw them? Or do you is it like baking? You go and you do each process so you can concentrate on, like, I'm just drawing now. I'm just writing, my writing hat's on, my inking hat, my coloring hat's on.
Right. So I have to write at least 6, hopefully more. And then I'll do the sketching, send them to Dan. We'll talk about them. And then I'm on my own the rest of the way, 100%. I do all the inking, then I scan them, then I do all the black and white panels, then I color them, then I do the black and white and color strip conversions.
Yeah.
Then I have a beard.
Well, read Rosebuds. Thanks, Steve, for your question.
And Wayno, thank you for that. And I have a couple of questions about your schedule. So do you keep office hours during the week? Do you have any hard rules about working on the weekends, anything like that?
I prefer not to work on weekends, but I do some work every day of the week, to some extent. If I have some time with nothing going on, and I can get a little bit done ahead of time, because you have to do real life stuff too.
Wayno, fix the sink. The sink is clogged, Wayno. I don't want to hear
Andy.
I mean, I think that's something that even an amateur who wants to do this doesn't realize. The thing about the daily strips is that if you lose 3 days, it takes a long time to get those 3 days back up, right?
Right. It's not like if you work at, I don't know, a store or something where, I have vacation, and when you come back, you're doing like a normal workload. If you are doing a daily column or a daily editorial or a daily comic or anything, and you take 2 days off, you have to do 4 days work the next 2 days.
Yeah, twice as much work before, twice as much work after.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, because we're going to start wrapping up, we're going to drop the landing gear in a minute. But earlier on in our conversation, you were talking about selling gags, and Paul Pate, maybe somebody else in the chat, was very interested in that. And that's kind of like not a secret, but that's kind of like a underutilized part of comic strip world, is back when people would sell gags. There'd be gag salesmen that would come to your studio and sell you it with a briefcase. One of the first people I met in the business was Mark Rose, who was an old school gag salesman. So I have a Maury Turner strip that he wrote in the studio. So I was just wondering, with that part, was that just something you figured you could do, Wayno? Like you were like, hey, I could do that. I'll sell you some strips. Or were you kind of surprised to kind of like stumble into that whole part of selling people gags? If that makes sense.
I guess because I was used to doing freelance illustration work where you would approach people and say, if you give me an assignment, I can create an illustration for it, that I kind of assumed it would work the whole way. It would work that way. So I was surprised at how well it worked. But kind of figured that you could do that.
All right, last question, and then we're going to get you out of here because I'm sure you need to pee. Tim Fielder says, so then how do you handle vacations, Wayno? For example, if you're taking 2 weeks off, do you do an extra 2 weeks buffer?
I try to, yeah. So I'll work overtime.
All right. Last one, and they would kill me if I didn't ask. D jumps in under the Indiana Jones fence. One more question: what's the registered trademark for Wayno about? What's that about, Wayno?
So nobody else can do that. Can call themselves. No other cartoonists can call themselves Wayno.
I had to teach myself how to do that little character thing on my back.
Yeah, I mean it is legitimately registered trademark with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office.
Except no substitutes.
Right. Yeah. And I get to put that little R next to the thing. Okay. So before we go,
yes, sir.
At the end of my screen here, I had like a couple of my favorite gags from last year.
Yeah, let's do it.
So if we can we close on that?
Oh no, yeah. We'll put it back up.
Sorry about that.
Okay. So this one was based on real life. Because we recently had to replace our dishwasher, and some of the cycles you have to use your phone. I figured there's probably a toilet that does that. And one of the things I like to do is use objects as characters rather than people. And this one that I did last year was a cassette tape talking to a phone about mixtapes, and this one went crazy online. I got like 40,000 hits on this. Wow. And I don't know why. I got a lot of comments on it. Another thing I like to do is make fun of superhero comics. I figured that those guys could encounter each other. They're both in the same generation.
That's fantastic.
And I'll just end with another one with music. It's a dumb one, but I really like this one a lot. Although I got told that I should have drawn, like the guitar was facing the wrong way because he should be playing left-handed. So, what are you going to do?
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Wayno. And Wayno, is there? This is what I talked about my Bizarro trade books. Are they still putting out Bizarro trades or any collected books?
No plans for any right now, but I would love to do one. I don't know if no plans at the moment.
Okay.
So
I was wondering if you were in print form, like the other stuff with Dan. That was why. Awesome. All right. So, Wayno, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
I doggedly chased you down to be on the show, and I'm so glad that you relented.
I'm so glad that you reminded me that you asked me at one time, and I said no.
You were like, "No, thank you." I was like, "Okay, all right."
I said good day.
Yeah,
that's totally fair.
It was like
I said good day, and you
good day, sir.
Yeah, your NCS scarf, and you said good day.
Yeah, podcasts are humbug. Yes.
Yeah, no, well, I hope you had a good time.
I had a good time. It was good to see you.
You too.
Good to meet you, Mike and Steve, and hope to see you guys all again.
Yeah.
All right.
Rubens weekend.
Thanks, Wayno. Thanks, Wayno. Oh, yeah, we'll see you at the Rubens.
See you at the Rubens. Yes.
Thank you. All right. Have a good night, Wayno.
Good night.
I'm going to let Wayno go so he doesn't have to do Kirby hands. He was just like, all right. No. That was a great episode. I love that we have been celebrating the art form in all of its facets for so long. And, we're still turning that decahedron, Steve Conley, and there's still stuff that we haven't uncovered yet.
Did you say dodecahedron? Are we having him next week?
That's right. We're having the decahedron one. So I want to give a shout out to next week's guest. We're just running down the line with cartoonists. We have Maria Scrivan is going to be on. Maria is a quadruple threat who is a acclaimed middle grade graphic novelist, and also a syndicated strip cartoonist. And she's been also a mainstay in the NCS for a really long time. And I think we're going to have a really fantastic chat with Marie. I can't wait. So thanks everybody. A lot of really great things going on in the chat. Any last words for tonight? We usually don't have time to do that, but I wonder, Steve, if you have anything.
I love that. I thought that a fantastic guest. I love his work. It makes me laugh. It consistently hits it out of the park. It's that's not an easy feat.
Mm-hmm. Mike, anything from you?
Fetchin wants me to feed him.
Fair enough.
he's the boss.
Yeah, he's sitting here meowing at me like, "Come on,
come on, let's call this." Yeah, it is pet hour. So
anything you'd like to add, Jamar?
Well, you know what? One of the things that I've been kind of in the middle of since I got involved with the NCS is, talking to people who have no idea what we're talking about. We're already weirdos because we're cartoonists, and then there's a group of us. What is there? What's that about? What's up with the sandwich that you get at the award show? Like all the kind of goofy questions I get. But really, what all of this is about a community, right? It's a kinship. It's a community of like-minded people who, want to further the art form. And this is what Pencil to Pencil's about. It's straight up shop talk. Even when the guests talk about things and he goes like, I don't know if you heard that. Of course we know what you're talking about because we're cartoonists. And just, being out in the wild for so long, you kind of aren't even used to being around your own people. So that's another reason I love this live stream that we do and having great guests like Wayno. So that's what I got to say.
Fantastic.
Awesome. All right, guys, we're going to get out of here. Thank you so much. Next Wednesday, 8 p.m., same bed time, same bat channel. We're going to have Maria Scrivano on, and you had better like and subscribe. We had a full house tonight. Don't you just leave because Wayno's gone. You better show up.
Stay right here. Keep that
browser open. Gosh,
keep that browser open for a whole week.
And we have how many years? 5 years of archive?
5 years.
Are you kidding? Go watch those archives, y'all, and then next Wednesday you'll be bleary-eyed and
there'll be a test. There'll be a test.
Guys, the energy was great. We're going to call it a night. Thank you so much. For my co-host, I'm JAMAR NICHOLAS. We had a great time. I would be remiss if we left before I said, make sure you wash those curvy hands. Oh, those are good, Steve. Good job. Oh, that's a great one, Mike. The one-hander.
Oh, that's Galactus right there.
All right, guys. See you next week.